welcome to another Biz Buzz segment here on the Blank Page to Bestseller podcast. As always, I am joined by Colleen and KZ, and this week we are mourning the loss of the mass market paperback. Rest in peace. Good format. Now, I don't know about you two, but I myself was a quite an avid reader growing up. I know we've talked about this in the past. I know you two both were avid readers in the past. So I'm sure between the three of us, we've all read quite a few mass market paperbacks. And I think that losing the format, we'll talk a little bit more about this in what's going on, but losing this format kind of is a big deal from what we all used to read growing up and in the past. Would you guys agree with that?
I totally agree with it. I loved going and looking when you went to the grocery store or the drugstore or whatever, even the library, and you found you just look and say, "Oh, what's next? What's next?" and pick it up.
Yeah. KZ, were you a big paperback reader?
Yes, actually, I was from the time. I mean, I can remember when we used to be able to get them in when I was in grade school, and I think we paid a dime to buy a paperback. So
Hmm.
all of my allowance money went from buying candy at the local store to buying paperbacks.
Yeah, yeah. I loved paperbacks when I was reading because they were so cheap and easy to read and buy. And um, yeah, I think that losing this format, again, we'll talk a little bit more about the reasons behind it, but it's gonna be there, there's gonna be a change in the industry, definitely losing this format.
I think there's already a change in the industry, Peter, and that's probably what's caused this to happen, is the changes in the industry.
Yeah. So let me rewind just a little bit. We've been talking a little bit about we're losing the mass market paperback. Let's give our listeners, just in case they are unfamiliar with the term mass market paperback, um, what is a mass market paperback? Those are the books. They're usually like 4 by 7 that you would see put in the like Colleen was saying, the newsstands or the grocery stores or the drugstores or everyone's favorite, the airport bookstore. The really cheap, I don't want to say cheap as in bad quality, but like the cheap price wise for books printed, that people could easily go pick up a copy and read for less than it would cost for a hardcover book. And they are, I think the big key to that was, one, it was cheaper to produce, but two, the mass market side of things was they were able to be distributed very, very widely to many, many different stores, so more people could pick up the books and just go by just going to the bookstore.
Yep,
Does
yep.
that make
I
sense to you
haven't.
guys?
Yeah, yeah. Can I add something about
Yeah. Yeah.
our recent trip to Florida? And we flew down to Florida, and I had read the book I had with me. So in the airport down in Orlando, I went to the bookstores that are there, and I could not find one thing I was interested in, not one.
Mm.
I was looking for the soft paperback because it's easier to carry on the flight and whatever. And so I was really disappointed. I'm like, there are no books here. Hard, I mean, nothing I was interested in, but still the quantity they had was not much. So I was like, wow.
Hmm. And I
Now we
think that's
understand why.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So the news of the mass market paperback being discontinued came at the end of last year. There was one of the biggest distributors of the mass market paperback format, which is ReaderLink. And they said at the end of 2025 that they would stop distributing mass market paperbacks. So technically, I guess they've already stopped, and that's probably why you ended up not seeing as many of the books that you were looking for while you were down there on your Florida trip.
Yeah, now that I know, because I hadn't read the article before, that's what's going on, but it's just sad. I think
Mhm.
it's, you know, anyway. I like to read a paperback because we read and we're on the computer all day, either proofing or doing work. And so I have the digital that I can get to, but I don't prefer it because I'm on the computer all day.
Mhm. I totally agree. I love a physical book still. Yes, it's nice to have like a Kindle or whatever that you can keep all your books on, but sometimes the physical book is just scratches that itch that you have. But yeah, so let's take a little bit of a look at what and why the mass market paperback is um is going away. So I think Casey, earlier you said you used to go to like the little bookstore and buy your paperbacks for like a nickel. Is that right?
Well, no, those days were when we got it, when I got it, when they actually came into my grade school classroom, and we could order from the catalog.
Oh yeah,
But no, I
yes.
always did. But I always got my paperbacks, and I mean, I can remember buying paperbacks for $1,
Mhm.
and then they went up, for a couple of dollars. It still was great. And now, well, we'll keep going. But yeah, those were the good old days.
Yeah, so the rise of the mass market paperback really came from the publishers wanting to find a way to basically sell the books that they had, or like whether that be first runs or even backlists of their authors, to a wider audience for cheaper. And that's where the mass market paperback really came out. And the big draw, like I've said before, is how they were able to do it so cheaply, and it really was able to reach a whole lot of people that didn't always, before that, have the opportunity to do any sort of reading. So I think that's really, I, I think the growth of reading in the U.S. as a hobby for pleasure and all of that probably was spurred on by the rise of the mass market paperback. um, this happened back. I don't know if you guys saw any dates specifically, but from what I've heard, it's like usually between like the '60s and the '90s is like really when the mass market paperback had its big moment. So there were 30 years or so that it was really big, but there were some big sales that came from mass market paperbacks. Like a lot
But
of people would buy.
yeah, I just read a little notice that in 1982 they said romance novels, soft paperback covers accounted for at least 25% of all the paperback sales. That's a lot.
They probably still do, to be truthful, Colleen.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Just more expensive books.
right, exactly. Because in 2013 they said 51% sales.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 I think we talked about romance novels a little bit ago, and I made the little joke that the romance cover was the Fabio on the front, and that's how everyone knew it was a romance book. But like I think that's the reason I think that is because of these mass market paperbacks, because that's really that was the hallmark of the mass market paperback romance genre, was it not?
Well, Fabio was definitely the first big name in those covers, but now we just call them generically man chests. So
Oh, God.
I will
Oh,
let
that's
you know
funny.
I do not put man chests on my covers. Okay, that's a personal preference.
Yeah, I look at some of your romance mans on the covers. Mans. That's not a word, Colleen.
Hmm. No, I don't know if either of you know of this book, but the one book that always popped up when I was doing research was Valley of the Dolls. Have either of you read Valley of the Dolls?
Oh, a long time ago I did. Yeah.
Nope.
Well, what I found in my research was really interesting. So like I said, mass market paperbacks were really good for the reader because more people could buy them. They were saying that when Valley of the Dolls came out, there were about 300,000 hardcover books that were sold, which, like, in and of itself, not a bad thing. That's quite a lot of books. But when you take a look at the paperback version, there were 4 million sales in just the first week in the year after it published its hardcover.
Totally believe that because it came out first in hardcover. In fact, that used to be always the hardcover came out first, always.
Right.
And then those of us who didn't want to pay for the hardcover, we would wait for the paperback. And the paperback was sometimes 6 months to a year later.
Right.
But now I think Louis L'Amour was one of the very first of the big names who started publishing his paperbacks first.
Yes. Yes. You're right. A lot of them started out just as like the I don't want to say a second run, but it really was like a second run of the book.
Or the second
as
run,
the
yeah.
Yeah. So and I think that helped because people knew the book, people knew the authors, so that had a little bit of helped gain some momentum for the format. But yeah, after once that format took off, you're right. There were people who were doing their first runs as these mass market paperbacks. And Louis L'Amour was one of the big ones who did that.
Yep, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and we're talking a lot about about what it was like in the heyday. It's an amazing concept to think about that this has been it's just a 30 to 40 year run of paperbacks where this is something that for the most part all of our adult lives we've known a paperback format. Okay, it was not known before then. There was no real true paperback. You could get a kind of a paperback as a proof, but it really wasn't anything you'd want to keep. So when digital came out, and I will tell you that people have been crying that the paperback is dying ever since digital came out. And it has definitely declined. There's no question about it. You've got the numbers on that, Peter, I'm sure. But when digital came out, it was such a more convenient format and has only become more and more convenient, but it is not necessarily more pleasurable. I agree with you too. I do enjoy most reading a book, with having a book in my hand, physically reading it. But there are generations, I'm not going to say a generation, there are generations who do not read paperback, who do not read hardback. They only read on a digital reader. And that has a lot to do with, that is one aspect, not all of it, one aspect of the change in the market.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big reasons for the change is the fact that so many people are reading on the e-readers, whether that's Kindle or Kobo or wherever that they have their books. But like we were saying earlier, that some of the authors who first got their start using the mass market paperback format, that's kind of transitioned now, would you guys say, into the ebook? That's where a lot of those authors are getting their start because it is cheaper and easier to produce.
Yeah. Well, you go, Nick, Candy, Casey.
Well, I would agree that there's no question about it. The majority of books now are being published in ebook either first or at the same time as a printed version. Audiobook is the most popular, but it is not the most prevalent because of the costs associated in publishing it, in producing it.
Right.
Okay. When they bring the cost of producing down to where it competes with the cost of a digital book or even the cost of a current print book, you're going to see another jump in the market and how things work. I believe that's me predicting for what it's worth. But yeah, definitely digital is preferred, not by everyone, but by enough purchasing readers that it's made all the difference. The key there is purchasing. And I do want to say this. Peter. And if I'm out of order with where you want to go with this, just smack my hands. But uh, the paperback book and the hardback book are now so close in price to actually print. The cost for actual production of the printing of the book. I'm not talking about the prep work. I'm not talking about the distribution. I'm talking just simply what it costs to print a book are very, very close. The cost of paper, the number of pages, even the sizes of the books, it's the same. There's not enough of a difference to make a paperback book distinguishable in the way it used to be.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big things that I've noticed as I've done some of the research is the cost to produce has just gone up enough that the publishers and the retailers don't want to raise the price of the book itself that they're selling.
Right.
And if they keep raising the price, like you said, it's going to just start matching some of the other book formats like paper or like hardcovers and some, I don't want to get too into the weeds with formats, but like there's like trade paperbacks, which are slightly different than mass market paperbacks, blah, blah, blah. But, the cost is getting to be so similar that that doesn't really make sense for the publishers and the printers to continue with using the mass market format.
Right, because it requires a different type of printing. The printing press, the actual hardware of printing is different for a trade paperback versus a hardback book versus a what are we talking about here? The
mass markets.
Mass market. Thank you, Peter. The mass market paperbacks. Yeah. So,
yeah.
And of course the digital. I'll just give you a quick example, and then you can move on to a different part of the topic here. But Amazon in this past year, I don't remember exactly when it was, but they announced a change in their paperback structure, where if I publish a retail price for a paperback book of less than $9.95. Okay, that's the retail price. If I price it at less than $9.95, I won't get a royalty on that.
Because of cost, I'm guessing.
Because of cost, yeah. Yep.
Oh, I won't say something there, but
well, you're not wrong, Colleen, but I can see the numbers when I go into my back end, and I know what
no, I know.
charging.
I know
so.
you see the net numbers. I just
You're not going to find that I disagree with you.
Yeah, and so with all of that, that makes, from the business side of things, it makes sense.
Yes,
and I understand why this format was on its last legs, and now is probably hopefully not gone for good, but it looks like it probably is gone for good at this point.
There's no replacement on the horizon that I've seen, Peter.
Yeah. I do want to take I know we've talked a lot of the specifics and nitty-gritties on things, but I do want to take a little bit of a look at some of like the people that as authors who really made their mark in the mass market world. I know we talked a little bit about Louis L'Amour. I don't know about you guys. I'm a big Stephen King fan. So he really got his start, or one of the ways that he got his start was through the mass market paperbacks. Colleen, I know you used to read a lot of like the Danielle Steele books.
Danielle Steele, James Patterson, Nora Roberts. Yeah.
Those are all mass market, authors who really cemented their legacy using that format. KZ, anyone that you've read? Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm not sure. I think Janet Ivanovich, all of hers I've read have been in paperback.
Yeah.
I actually met her once. I went to a book signing.
That's cool.
Nice. Yeah, KZ, any authors that you would say you have connected to the mass market world?
Not anyone in particular. I think that there are just so many. I've never been one who read only paperback or only hardback or
Mhm.
even only digital. I mean, I've read digital since the first coming out. I used to read them in I used to download them when they were in PDF, and they were horrid, but I still read them. But so for me, I never distinguished where I was getting the book until I started actually working in this industry. And so I don't have any one, but I know that it's a long list,
Yeah.
and that same long list are just as prevalent now in the digital world.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was interesting, kind of hit me as I was reading through this, is just some of the names of the publishers that were doing this. As I was reading through, through some of the research, I kept on coming across the one place that kind of like, you ever spark a memory from your past. Bantam books. Like all of a
Oh,
sudden I was like,
yeah.
oh yes, I know. I read
Yeah.
so many books from Bantam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, Bantam is not doing paperbacks anymore. Wow, that's huge.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy. One thing that I did notice is kind of again another let's just say side effect of the industry. Like KZ, you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but a lot of the paperbacks when they first started were like the second runs, and they got their start. You can go a little more into detail, but they were basically a second licensing that happened of the book, and that's why they came out 6 months or a year later. But they were done usually by separate publishers from the hardback. But over the course of the industry, guess what? A lot of those publishers ended up just getting absorbed by the big five. But Casey, do you want to talk a little bit about what you meant by the like the second licensing there?
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping in mind that we're going back to the early 60s when the paperbacks first started being widely distributed or widely printed and distributed. They required a separate licensing. Now they still require a separate ISBN, but you don't necessarily have to have a separate you don't necessarily have to have a separate license as a publisher to publish in a different format. That depends on the license that you have in general. So the early licenses were all okay. You've got hardback, you can print it. Now, if you want paperback, you're going to pay me again. Okay. And that's why for so long, only the best sellers became paperback because they had to buy another license, and so they would have to make sure that they paid out before they added another license. And then I'm not sure just when this happened, but there was an agreement that was created and became widely accepted that allowed for a printer, a publisher to get both the hardback and the paperback rights at one time. Okay. And that is when that is when it really bloomed and you saw so many more paperbacks. Now, these agreements were generally from, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 2 to 10 years. Okay. So depending on what you negotiated. So in many cases, these agreements have now run out. So if a publisher does want to get rights for paperback, they first of all have to then pay for it again, or they need to make sure that they're going to make money on the paperback. And if they don't see that they're going to make money on it, they're not going to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. And it's definitely, at least from the author's perspective, it was definitely another way to earn their royalties. And it was, if they were, these big mass market paperbacks, they could really help, with those, like I said, those royalties, and help make you make a living because they were so widely acceptable or so accessible.
Accessible. It was a lot less. It was a lot easier to get published also in paperback. Once this started happening, the licensing for paperbacks became less expensive than the licensing for hardback. So it became easier. There were publishers who popped up who were dealing only in paperback, like Bantam. I mean, that was their name, their claim to fame. Right. So it became easier for authors to become published in that way.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we had the real revolution in our modern world, which is print on demand.
Right. Yep. But I don't know about the last time you guys have been to a bookstore, but um, basically it feels like 75% of the books nowadays are all these paperbacks. So, you know, that revolution really has made a change, and then it's stuck.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, with the distribution going away for the trade, or for the mass market paperback, we have to consider what's going to happen with the trade after this.
Right.
With the majority of paperbacks that are published through Amazon, for example, are trade paperbacks,
Mhm.
not mass market. Mass market is a specific type of book. Those are still going strong,
Mhm.
but that's because you can buy digital, paperback, hardback, and audio in one place and choose what format you want.
Mhm.
It's a lot harder for a bookstore to carry all of those formats.
Yeah, correct. There's just not enough space.
No,
It's simple as that. I'm glad you mentioned the trade paperback, because I do want to take just a quick little peek at what the death of the mass market paperback might mean for trade paperbacks. I'm not going into the specifics on the differences here.
good.
You can do your own research about it. There's plenty of articles out there, but the trade paperback is still a viable format to publish in.
Yes.
And there's a lot of different reasons for that. But I think that one of the big things that you're seeing is readers want a special type of book when they are reading. You see a lot on like Book Talk or Bookstagram or whatever. It's the very nice looking copy of the book. Is that what you're seeing a lot too, KZ?
Yes, absolutely. When you a good example of a trade paperback is one I read not too long ago. Actually, it was part of my writing group to read it, and it's definitely a trade paperback. It was slightly larger. It's a 5 by 6 6 by 9 format, and it was just a plain paperback from the outside. But when you went through and looked at each chapter, she had illustrations. They didn't do anything really fancy, but just the little bit of what they did to set themselves off made the reader feel better, I think, about buying that book, because it was more expensive. Okay.
Right.
I got it on sale and I paid $9 for it. Okay, but it was normally a $22 book.
Right. Right.
Does that make
y-
sense, Peter?
yeah, like with these mass markets, you didn't have any like illustrations or anything like that.
No.
But nowadays, people are looking for that. You see that like a nice introductory illustration, maybe with chapters, like you said. Some other things that I've seen too are nowadays there's a lot of books out there that are being turned into movies and TV shows and the like. And a lot of times you'll see like a tie-in with the movie poster as the book cover on some of these books as well. Nowadays, you had that some with the mass markets, but I think you're seeing it a lot more with the trades as well.
We're also seeing special add-ons, like for instance, something you can get now as an author is you can get your book published, or printed rather, with glitter on the edges or color on the edges, and things like that. So, and you can do spot color inside of your book as well. Most authors who are just just self-publishing don't take that extra step unless they are looking to break into the market of the paperback or hardback trade.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about different markets for paperbacks. We've talked about so much that I don't know if there's anything else we have to cover. Have we talked about everything? I think we've talked about everything about what a mass market paperback is, why we're so sad to see them go, and then why they're going the way of the dodo, it seems like. Colleen, Casey, anything you think we need to add on about the mass market paperback today?
I think you guys covered it really well.
I will say, I think that for the majority of readers, the only way they're really going to notice is what Colleen noticed.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they're not going to see those smaller books. They're not going to see those paperback books as readily available as they ever were. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. We're saddened by it because we see it as a change in an era.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that we work in a market that is volatile
Mm-hmm.
and is driven by what the reader wants.
Mm-hmm.
And if the readers are not buying those paperbacks, then they're not going to be printed.
Mm-hmm.
It costs too much money for someone to print it and have the cover ripped off and send it back to the landfill,
Right. It's definitely a change in the end of an era, but it's something that we'll have to see what new adventures lie ahead for authors and readers alike. But I just know that I'll probably be making more stops to Goodwill to pick up a couple of those old mass
I was
markets.
just thinking that, or the other, all the secondhand shops. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Check out the yard sales. You'll see lots of them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
When I was down in Florida last year, at my sister's, we went to, it's called Blessings. It's a secondhand store for things. I got some paperbacks for 25 cents.
Perfect.
Yep.
Well, I do want to thank you both for joining me to talk about the end of an era with these mass market paperbacks. Listeners, if you have a favorite author who was a mass market paperback author, or a favorite book that you remember, or maybe you have a great story of finding a book that you just had to read, maybe while you're at the airport or in line at the grocery store, let us know. We'd love to hear about your stories with the mass market paperback. But until next week, I do want to thank Colleen, KZ. Thanks for joining me, and we'll be back again next week with another Biz Buzz segment.